further escalates the potential for a trade war between China and the U.S., which could involve soybeans and other agricultural products.
China just walked away, and in just a few days, 88% of U.S. soybean exports were gone. Now, our fields are still full, silos are overflowing, and whole towns are hanging by a thread. If one crop can bring this much damage this fast, what happens when the next domino falls?
America's Heartland on the road video update, courtesy the Flipcam. We're here at Iowa State University.
If there's any place in the U.S. that feels every shockwave from this soybean disaster in real time, it's Iowa. This state doesn't just grow crops, it lives and breathes farming. With more than 9 million acres set aside just for soybeans, this place has long been the beating heart of American agriculture. For decades, Iowa's rolling landscape was shaped by a steady rhythm: plant in spring, harvest in fall, load up the trucks, and ship it all out. Farmers here were proud. They fed the world, and they did it with some of the finest soybeans you could grow. But this year, something snapped, and it didn't happen with noise or drama. It happened quietly, no warning, no sirens. China, our biggest customer for soybeans, simply turned off the faucet. Overnight, long-term contracts that farmers counted on just disappeared. And when they vanished, Iowa's world flipped upside down.
I worry about, some regulation and not so much from just regulation, period.
It's that so many farmers depended on those export contracts to survive another year. Without that guaranteed buyer, what once looked like a solid harvest is now a financial trap. Prices have dropped to around $9 a bushel, well below the break-even point for most folks out here. And it keeps dropping. Farmers aren't holding on to their soybeans waiting for prices to rise. They're holding on to them because no one's buying. Silos are packed to the roof. Some are even stacking heavy-duty bags in the corners of barns, doing anything they can to store beans they can't sell. They're holding on to hope, but it's the kind they can't afford.
Focused on growing a crop. At the Iowa Soybean Association, we will continue to work with partners.
One farmer in Marshalltown told us his son had to drop out of college this semester. They just couldn't cover tuition. That's the kind of ripple effect we're talking about. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's real lives, real plans, and real families being thrown off course. Bills are stacking up, dreams are on hold, and folks are wondering what next season might bring, if anything. And it doesn't stop at the edge of the field. In Cedar Rapids and Des Moines, soybean processing plants, once running full speed, are now only open 3 days a week. That means fewer hours, fewer jobs, and a whole lot more worry for the folks who used to depend on those paychecks. And folks are still hoping, but hope doesn't pay the bills.
A beautiful farm in Iowa. There are soybeans planted for the fall harvest, and the hope is...
Truckers who used to haul beans across the Midwest are calling it quits. Some are putting their rigs up for sale on Craigslist. Others have taken on nighttime pizza delivery just to stay afloat. These aren't just figures in a report. These are your neighbors, doing what they have to do to survive while their main income disappears.
More tariffs could mean more trouble for Iowa farmers. The latest rates with China means that some of the state's biggest ag exports...
Even the state government is feeling the pain now. Revenue from farming and related exports is drying up, fast. That's forcing some tough decisions. Cuts are happening in the places people count on most: education, healthcare, and public safety. In some towns, they're choosing between keeping the school open or keeping the power on. This is no longer just about trade. This is a full-blown economic crisis unfolding right in our backyard.
It's a $12 billion a year business, Ron. With all this talk of trade tensions, what's the impact been, if any, on your business so far?
There's a strange stillness across rural Iowa these days. Fewer trucks on the roads, fewer workers in the plants. Less reason to think things will bounce back soon. This state once took pride in feeding the world. Now, the collapse of the soybean market has felt like a gut punch, not just to the economy, but to a whole way of life.
Yeah, much of the soybeans grown here are sold to the Chinese market. WGN's Patrick Elwood caught up with one farmer to learn about his concern.
You're talking about $9 or so billion that we're going to lose. But if China gets cut off, really there's not enough buyers in the rest of the world to make up for that loss.
Now, Brazil dominates soybean.
For decades, Illinois has been the powerhouse of the Midwest. It's where soybeans are processed, packaged, and shipped out. Millions of bushels every year. All of that moved through a vast network of trains, trucks, and factories. And for a long time, it all ran like clockwork, smooth, fast, dependable. The whole operation was enormous, and it worked. It kept people working and towns thriving. But the moment demand for soybeans disappeared, that giant machine began to shut down.
We do have a short window. Usually in the spring when I start planting, it's usually about a month.
In towns like Decatur, where some of the country's largest soybean processors are located, the factories aren't running full speed anymore. They've scaled back to just 60% of their usual output. That means fewer shifts, fewer paychecks, and a lot more worry for men and women who've been on the job for 20 or 30 years. At first, it didn't seem too bad. A furlough here, a skip day there. But now, these slowdowns have become the new normal. Out by the factory gates, the job boards used to be filled with help-wanted signs. Today, those boards sit mostly empty, and the workers walking past them already know why.
Need to have an agreement. We need to get along because they need us, we need them.
In Peoria, one company that specializes in packaging, they print the labels on soybean oil bottles, just slashed production orders by almost 50%. That single decision affected dozens of workers. And it didn't stop there. It hit their suppliers, vendors, and service providers across the region. Even the railroads are slowing down. Freight trains that used to haul soybeans from fields in the north to ports in the south, they've stopped. The rail cars are still there, just parked, idle, rusting.
Which markets are going to be open in 6 to 8 months and which markets are not going to be, and making sure that we can have the opportunity to supply the customers that are looking for our product.
In Joliet, once a hub of grain movement, the terminals are starting to feel like abandoned warehouses, waiting for a market that doesn't exist anymore. And maybe the hardest part? There's no big headline, no public protest, just people showing up for work and slowly realizing there may be no work left.
One factory worker from Springfield who's been doing night shifts for 20 years put it best. I've never seen a week with only 3 days of work. No one's asking what the next shift is anymore. They're asking if there'll be a job next month. That's how deep the uncertainty runs here.
Illinois isn't just bleeding revenue, it's losing its rhythm. The dependable movement of goods and money that kept everything going. The state has always relied on that constant motion. Crops moving, trains running, factories humming, people working. And when that movement slows, everything else starts to feel unstable. Trust in the system starts to fade. Families who once depended on steady routines are suddenly doing the math, groceries, gas, rent, tuition. And with planting season right around the corner, the pressure is mounting fast.
And with planting season upon us, pressure mounting on President Trump to put farmers at ease right now.
The ongoing trade war threatens to drive down major exports.
Minnesota isn't usually the first place people think of when it comes to soybeans. But with close to 27,000 soybean farmers, it's quietly become one of the top players in American agriculture. Those big open fields and hard-working tractors have long been the symbol of a state that plants smart, works hard, and ships a lot. But this summer, that feeling has changed. The fields are still there, the equipment is still moving, but something is missing, and it's hard to ignore. There's a stillness settling over the land, the kind of silence that shows up when hope starts to feel too expensive.
A national press call talking about the same thing, the uncertainty that the trade war is.
In the southwestern part of Minnesota, soybeans are a lifeline for small towns. And the crash didn't come with a bang. On sheets of paper taped to the doors of local farm co-ops. The notices said soybean purchases were temporarily suspended. But it wasn't about prices. It was about space. There's just nowhere left to put the crop. The processors are full. The demand has dried up. And the farmers who normally count on co-ops to unload their harvest are stuck. The soybeans are sitting there, ready, but they've got nowhere to go. And when that happens, everything else in these towns starts to jam up. One of the clearest signs? Equipment sales are collapsing. A dealer in Minnesota said seeders and planters are down more than 60% compared to last year. When farmers lose confidence, they stop spending. Because if you can't sell what you've already grown, why spend money to grow more? That mindset has caught on fast. Some are waiting before making any big purchases. Others are skipping planting altogether this year. And when the tractors stay parked, so does the cash flow for local businesses. Now, the banks are getting nervous too. A community bank in Albert Lea just announced it's reviewing its agriculture loan portfolio. That's a polite way of saying foreclosures may be coming. And it's not just about bad credit anymore. It's about fear. If you're a bank and you don't believe your borrower will be able to sell their crop, you protect yourself first. That leaves even the most responsible farmers with nowhere to turn. They're caught in a system that's squeezing them, and it's not their fault. The ripple effects are even showing up in the schools. A high school teacher in Marshall said more students are missing class, not because they're sick, but because families can't afford the gas to drive in each day. Others are pulling their kids out temporarily just to save on school lunches and home utilities. This isn't just a farming problem anymore. It's a full-blown crisis for entire communities. And it's all happening quietly. No news trucks, no rallies, no headlines.
Would not be big enough to balance out what we're going through right now.
That's an example of the pressure being put on elected officials and increasing by the day.
Just slow daily signs that things are breaking down. Minnesota isn't falling apart all at once. It's freezing. One loan, one sale, one student at a time. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's just as dangerous. Because when everything goes quiet, it doesn't mean things are better. It means people are giving up. And that kind of silence is the hardest thing to come back from. Do you think America can survive without its farmers?